That night, the sky bore no stars, only a shadow drifting quiet as breath pressed over Jerusalem like a seal from time before time began. No one saw it, no soldier, no priest. But when he gave up his spirit with a final breath, something ancient cracked. A gate was opened, not in heaven, but deep beneath the trembling earth. They thought he had died. Rome believed the execution complete. The priests assumed the heresy was buried. But what if death was only a veil, meant to be torn, in another layer of reality where no eye could see? No watcher dared move, a sound burst forth. The sound of light trespassing in the underworld. The crucified one was not lying still. He was moving, and the ground remembered how to tremble. A shift so silent, yet the stone wept under his steps. It is written, "You will not abandon my soul to Sheol." But before rising, he descended into the deepest, stillest hollows where the souls of the righteous, from Adam to Daniel, and the nameless faithful, waited unsleeping. As recorded in the hidden scrolls, even the watchers held their breath. He did not fall like a condemned man. He entered like a king cloaked in thunder. Beneath the earth was a kingdom men dared name only in whispers, Sheol. And that day, Sheol opened its mouth, not to devour, but to behold the light, for the first time since Eve bit the fruit. We think of those 3 days as silence, a still body, a sealed tomb. Friday dusk, then night, then Sunday morning. But no, they were 3 days of holy invasion, a march without sound, a war behind the veil, where light was never invited but came anyway, and where death was dethroned in its own hall. O soul who hears this, have you ever wondered what your ancestors saw when the light entered their prison? Follow him, downward, deeper, beyond the torn veil, to where the ancient ones waited for the promised one, to where hell mistook itself for eternal. Be silent now, for in this darkness, you will hear a voice, the voice of the Eternal One, breaking chains older than memory. And if your soul survives what this ritual reveals, you will know death was never the end, and silence was the first act of war. The sky had not yet gone dark, but night was already falling from within the human soul. The earth was silent, but it wasn't peace. It was the breathless stillness before the world breaks down and weeps. His body, still wet with blood, was lowered from the cross, wrapped in linen, like a newborn once again. Only this time, he was born into death. They thought it was over, but some things do not end with death, they begin from it. As twilight stretched its shadow, Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus carried him into a tomb, still breathing with the scent of fresh-cut stone. The entrance was sealed, the stone rolled in place, guards posted, the seal marked, everything locked. But no one knew the true door had opened. Not the tomb, the abyss! And the moment his soul slipped from flesh, he did not drift, he did not wander. He did not wait quietly for resurrection. He descended to where the souls of the faithful had been held for thousands of years, to where tears had long dried into memory, to where there was no time, only aching, only waiting. There, in Sheol, not the flames of Gehenna, but the shadowed holding beneath the thresholds of time, he set his foot. And when he touched the lowest floor of the earth, the spirit world stirred. A whisper awakened inside a dream, a light faint like a wick still burning in a prison without end. Abel looked up. Enoch held his breath. Ruth pressed her hand against the silence in her chest where a heartbeat once lived. And Faith had never left. He had come. No trumpets, no angels shouting, only stillness, shaking with unspeakable glory. Just a presence that made the whole imprisoned realm tremble. Sheol had swallowed generations, from the dust of Eden to the exiles of Egypt, from crowned kings to unnamed children. All had entered, none returned, until that night. There was a chamber in Sheol once called the bosom of Abraham. Not heaven, not hell, but a waiting place for those who died with the promise still burning in their bones. There, time thickened like incense, memory tasted like ash, and silence held its breath, as though all of history was just the inhale of a promise unfinished. Then a ripple, a breath, like the wind that once crossed Galilee. Light cracked through the black. He did not knock, he passed through. And in that instant, Abraham rose. No questions, no proof. For every prophecy from Isaiah to Daniel had just awakened in his eyes. Is it you? The words barely a whisper. But in that breath, more certainty than all scripture combined. He looked upon every soul, not with eyes, but with the light that spilled from wounds still bleeding in his hands, his feet, his side. That blood was the key, not to open gates, but to shatter shackles aged older than memory. As it once marked doorposts in Egypt, now it cracked open doors beneath the earth. From across the chasm, where the condemned howled without end, a voice laughed. You're too late, Jesus of Nazareth. A voice without a face, but full of hatred, older than creation. You were crucified. You are dead. You cannot save anyone. He spoke no word, for he was the Word, and that was enough. In the realm of the dead, speech carries no weight beside presence. And his presence was the Word made flesh, the Word that died, and now the Word alive inside death itself, not as a guest, but as its new master. For 3 days, it wasn't just Sheol that witnessed. The sacred framework of the cosmos began to crack. Even the pillars of chaos written in Job's lament began to bend. Above a tomb sealed, guards dozing, a body still. But below, life was moving inside death. He had entered the place everyone feared to make it a passage. No one saw, no one heard, but every soul there knew. He did not come to ask. He came to declare, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And the silent walls heard it. For the first time in the history of death, death itself knew it would soon kneel, pause. And what if it still does? Would you recognize the light? If it walked into your tomb, the lowest depths of Sheol were not meant for men. No light, no memory, no morning, no night, only frozen silence and souls that no longer belonged to humanity. When he departed from Abraham's bosom, the light he carried did not fade. With each step downward, it burned brighter, as if the darkness itself was feeding the flame. For he was walking toward the deepest place, a realm untouched by hope, a silence unbroken since before the flood. There, in chains older than Babel, were held the spirits not of men but of angels. Not fallen, but cast down. They did not cry. They did not sing. They did not pray. They were silent because they knew there was nothing left to say. They were once the sons of heaven, watchers who abandoned their domain, took the daughters of men, and begot giants. The union of light defiled and flesh corrupted. the profaning of creation before humanity even named sin. The earth groaned, and God wept in Eden. To halt the rot before it reached the root, the Most High cast them into the abyss. It is written, He bound them in deepest darkness, in chains of gloom, awaiting judgment. And since that day no light had ever touched them, until now, until the footsteps of the Living One echoed in the place where time had ceased. He walked through layers of shadow, unshaken, unhurried, unled. For every space belongs to Him, from the blazing heights of heaven to the bottomless pit without name. These beings no longer resembled angels, their wings lost, their eyes blinded, their hearts hardened like the stones that chained them. They had long forgotten worship. They remembered only waiting, not for mercy, but for the final word spoken by the one they once tried to defy. As He drew near, they raised their faces, not from reverence, but because they could not look. His light split the dark that had swallowed them for thousands of years, and for the first time since before the flood, they heard the voice of heaven. Not a word of pardon, not a word of promise, but a word of judgment. It is finished. You have lost. The seed of the woman has come. You who sowed destruction are now severed from every bloodline forever. No protest, no rebuttal. They had no voice left, for the final word had been spoken by the one whose breath outweighs death itself. These spirits once carved into idols, whispered in myths, and worshipped atop ziggurats now lay prostrate before a man from Nazareth. A man clothed in wounds but whose very frame glowed from within. He summoned no storm, raised no thunder. He simply stood in the bottomless deep like a sword that did not need drawing to declare victory. Each word he spoke did not pierce ears but soul, like fire kissing frozen stone. You will never leave this place. You will never sow corruption among men again. You will never stand in the way of my Father's promise. And when the final word fell like stone into the abyss, everything stopped. Even torment forgot to breathe. Only absence remained. The absence of hope, the sentence itself. No trial, no appeal. His presence was proof enough. He turned his back, not from contempt, but because it was done. This was no blessing. It was a sealing. The end of a rebellion older than memory. Every scheme that tried to poison the holy seed from Eve's first ache to Babylon's towers was crushed beneath the feet of the crucified one. He left that realm behind bare, cold, unchanging. A scar in the spirit world. A layer of hell that needed no flame because his absence was eternal torment. Then he began to rise. Step by step, layer by layer, carrying with him a light cracked open from his own torn heart. The light long buried beneath dust-covered promises and silenced prophets. Above, Abraham's bosom held its breath, but thousands of souls lifted their heads. They had heard movement in the dark. They had seen the light cut through shadow like the first dawn of creation. And they knew! The waiting was ending. The key now rested in the hand of the Living One. And Sheol, once a wall, was about to become a door. No one truly knows what Abraham's bosom looked like. It was not a valley, not a throne room, not quite a sanctuary. It was a waiting place woven from memory, faith, and dreams unfinished. There was no sorrow here, but neither was there completion. Only waiting, a waiting beyond time. No ticking, no dusk, just breath held in the chests of the righteous. Beneath the veil of the spirit world, souls carried the shapes of every age shepherds, priests, prophetesses, warrior kings, and children slain before their voices could echo through earth. All of them. Seated side by side in a silence with no name, until something stirred, not footsteps, not thunder, but a ripple, a tremor across the sacred fabric of the realm. A light not born of fire, not drawn from sun, but from a heart that had once been pierced. He had returned, not from a journey, but from a silent war in the gut of hell. And the light he bore was not the light of life, but the light of triumph. All of Sheol held its breath. The river of souls, once adrift in quiet longing, began to swirl, as if stars from 1,000 galaxies tilted toward a single point, a figure burning like the sun in the middle of night. Abraham stood. He had been the first to hear the promise. He had laughed in doubt, then wept because he believed he had left his father's house with nothing but the words, "Go." And now he had come. No longer promise, no longer shadow, no longer dream. It was him, flesh once torn by whips, now standing radiant in the realm of souls. He looked at no one, yet no eye turned away, because in him every question, every metaphor, every ache across millennia had found its answer. And he spoke not loudly, yet each soul heard it as thunder within. "You waited for me. Today, I bring you home." Moses trembled. He had heard Yahweh in Sinai fire, had seen glory in a burning bush, but this light, this presence made even those memories fade like morning mist. David, giant slayer. Psalm weeper stood small. Tears streaked the face that once mocked Goliath, for he now recognized the melody hidden inside the voice. Isaiah, he who had written, "He was wounded for our transgressions," now trembled as his own prophecy stood breathing before him. And beside them, Ruth, whispered eyes fixed on the wounds that still glowed with mercy. "You are one of us, and yet not one of us." He said nothing more. He didn't need to, because the light inside him was already shaping a door never seen in this realm. Not carved by stone, not guarded by flame, but forged from a power that had conquered death. And in that moment Sheol cracked, not to receive him, but to release a nation of souls. An eternal exodus. No sea to part, no manna, no cloud, no pillar. Only the light radiating from him, carving a path through centuries of darkness. He walked, and they followed, step by step, none left behind. No more lambs, no more oxen, no more blood on doorposts, no more veils, no more waiting. For the Most High had made atonement with his own body. Each step away from Abraham's bosom was the sound of the old order shattering. The spirit realm stood still. Ancient thrones shook, and the powers of shadow realized. Once this door opened, it would never close again. He had promised, he had come, he had declared, he had conquered, and now he led the first of his people from a kingdom without borders, without death, without parting. A journey begun in the pit would end at the highest throne in all the heavens. But before the final step, he must pass through the place where it all began. A patch of earth, a sealed stone, a tomb that didn't yet know. It would never again hold the dead, but would open to reveal a universe, reborn. On the surface, everything remained untouched. The stone still sat before the tomb, like a final period chiseled in rock. The Roman guards' eyes red with fatigue, hands clinging to spears, minds desperate to believe it was only a corpse within. Far off in the city, the people entered Sabbath with relief. A name they feared was now 6 feet beneath their certainty. No one knew that all of heaven and earth was holding its breath. No one knew that the body inside no longer held a soul, and that the soul was no prisoner but a returning king, carrying the keys of death. Behind him a procession of souls glowing like dawn through ancient dark. He had promised to rise on the 3rd day. It was not metaphor. It was a deadline, a declaration. You have 3 days left to rule the grave. The first day passed in silence. In heaven, angels did not fly. On earth, believers wept, mockers schemed. No one saw the undercurrent shifting beneath their feet, like tectonic plates of the spirit realm breaking free. He led the liberated from Abraham's bosom to the threshold between two realms, and the universe tilted. The second day, he paused. Not from weariness, not from delay, but because this was the boundary, the line between spirit and flesh, between proclamation and return, between the silence of Sheol and the breath of a reawakened world. Behind him, a cloud of saints burned with longing. They no longer feared. Before them stood the final veil, and the light within him began to press through. But first he knelt, not to beg, but to present. He lifted his hand still pierced and raised blood still living. Not to plead, but to complete a ritual no altar on earth had ever fulfilled. A sacrifice offered not in temple, but in the womb of the underworld, where time, sin, and sorrow were pressed into the same cup, and he drank it dry. The third day, the sun had not risen, but the spirit world was already blazing. He stood, and behind him, the multitude bowed low, not in terror but in awe, because this moment had been written before the first star was placed in the heavens. He turned back and looked upon Sheol. No anger, no regret, only a gaze that declared, "From this day forward you are not a gate, you are a hallway." Then he walked, not through walls, not in light-speed flight, but step by step toward a corpse wrapped in linen inside carved stone. And when his soul returned to his body, the laws of nature shivered. Blood once still flowed. Lungs filled. A heartbeat once. Not with life, but with resurrection. Above the stone still sat. The guards still slept. The sky remained dark. But below, a trumpet sounded without sound, a whisper louder than thunder. Life has begun its rebellion. He opened his eyes. No coughing, no staggering, no confusion, only a gaze clear, piercing, etched with the silence of 3 days in the deep, and the fire of every age yet to come. In that gaze, fear broke. Elsewhere, Lucifer felt the wind shift. He did not know why, only that something had slipped from his grasp. And he could not call it back. Power ripped from its roots. The throne of death began to crack. Outside, the stone had not yet moved. The sky had not yet bled gold. But beneath, a kingdom had already fallen. And he would not stay here. Soon the stone would roll. Light would pour in, and the world would witness something no prophet had ever fully dared to name. When the living one steps out of shadow, still bearing his wounds, and wearing a crown no hand can ever steal, no one moved the stone, no human hand touched it, no levers, no ropes, no spell, no chant. The stone moved on its own, not by force, but by a power greater than mass, greater than gravity, greater than the physics written into the bones of the world. A power buried 3 days deep, now rising like thunder beneath a sleeping earth. That morning, the sun had not yet risen, but the real light had already appeared. Not from the east, not from the sky, but from within the tomb. He did not emerge like one barely revived. He did not stumble like one dragged back to life. He stood, upright, radiant, clothed in majesty no one had granted, yet all of creation would bow before. Inside the tomb, the burial cloth was folded, not for neatness, not for ritual, but as a sign. Death itself had been folded away and left behind. The stone tomb was no longer a prison. It had become a witness. A silent one, but unignorable. The body was gone, because the crucified one was alive. Outside, the guards staggered. An earthquake had shaken them, but it was fear that kept them down. They saw, they didn't understand. And because they could not understand, they ran. They fled from a light that didn't burn, but revealed. A light in the shape of a man, still wounded, still pierced, yet unshakable, unstoppable. From a distance, the women approached. Spices, linen, tears still clinging to trembling faces. They were prepared for a body. Instead, they found an empty grave. "He is not here." The angel spoke it, but their souls already knew before their ears had heard. Because that emptiness echoed louder than Sinai's thunder. And he did not rush to crowds, did not ascend the temple steps, did not challenge Pilate, did not demand vengeance. He came for the broken, for the weeping, for the silent, for the ones who still carried a wound. Mary Magdalene stood, sobbing at the entrance. He called her name only once, and in that whisper chains shattered, not because she recognized his face, but because her soul recognized home. "Rabboni," she cried, and so it went one by one. Not by schedule, not by miracle, but by the wound within the believer. He came not to prove, but to finish a sacred journey, one that began with blood on Eden's soil. He showed them his hands, his side, not to reopen grief, but to say, "I went to the lowest to lift you to the highest." From that moment on, death was no longer an end. It became a threshold, a doorway once sealed, now marked, "Exit this way." He did not rise for himself alone. He rose for Abraham, for Ruth, for Isaiah, for Job, for the thief who whispered belief in his final breath. He rose for the unborn, for the scattered, for the weary, for me and for you. When he stepped out, there were no banners, no armies, no angels singing in the sky, only silence. But it was not empty, it was pregnant, heavy with glory. The silence before a new Genesis, that silence is breaking now, because it has become the first shout of the gospel. The one who was dead now lives forever, and the light he carries still pours into every remnant of Sheol hidden in the human heart. If it still feels dark, remember, the stone has rolled. He has stepped out, and the door will never close again. When he stepped out of the tomb, he did not walk alone. A multitude followed invisible, but radiant as shadows cast by glory. They moved like wind, a silent procession carrying the scent of ancient hope. They bore no flesh, yet each soul blazed with the fulfillment of every longing held for generations. There was Abel the first to die in faith, whose blood once cried out from the ground, now silenced in glory. There was Noah who built a vessel in mockery's face, now anchoring where no flood could ever reach. There was Moses whose staff had split seas, now parting a path through sacred space no mortal foot had ever touched. There was David the warrior psalmist who once cried, "Bless the Lord, O my soul," now offering his final song as he marched among the redeemed. There was Isaiah, prophet of wounds, beholding the pierced hands he had once described in trembling ink. There was Esther who once said, "If I perish, I perish," now walking in a life that could never perish again. Each soul a story, each story a faith, each faith now joining an eternal hymn, rising like smoke up the sides of a holy mountain. He did not turn back. He did not count heads. No one was missing. No one doubted. Before him an invisible gate, not heaven itself, but the threshold between promise and fulfillment. This gate not guarded by flaming swords, not sealed by sin, but held for one moment only when justice had been satisfied, and mercy crowned with a body broken. Long ago, on Sinai, Moses trembled at thunder. Now he stood with the ancient assembly, eyes fixed on a peak that no law had reached. No tablets, no fire, only a throne burning in the void where no soul had ever walked uninvited. But he who had once knelt in dust, washed feet, bled beneath thorns, and gave his breath to Sheol, now stood before that throne as the one with all authority in heaven, on earth, and beneath. No ladders, no ropes, only light flowing from within him like the first word of creation. And they followed. Every step he took formed a rung in the sky, every scripture a solid stone beneath their feet. From Sheol to Zion, from grave to glory, from waiting to wonder. They did not ask, "Where are we going?" They knew, "We are going home. Home to the place his blood had mapped. Home to the city Abraham saw from afar." The heavens shifted. Not with thunder, not with clouds, but with the trembling of their very foundations. Because never before had one who died led the first generation of resurrection. And as they neared, the everlasting gates began to shake, not in fear, but in recognition. He did not slow, he did not wait for heralds. He spoke, not with breath, but with being. "Lift up your heads, O you gates, and be lifted up, you everlasting doors, that the King of glory may come in." And the gates opened, not like doors, not like hinges, but like seeds cracking open in the first spring of a reborn cosmos. The guardian angels bowed. They had never been trained for this moment, when their own master walked through the veil from the side of shadow. Death defeated, the deceiver uncrowned, the righteous returned. No swords, no offerings, only faith once buried beneath centuries, now shining like constellations in the heavens of forever. And when the final foot crossed into glory, a song rose. Not from instruments, not from choirs, but from the fabric of light itself, welcoming saints who had waited long and finally arrived. This is not the end. This is the beginning of a kingdom with no Sheol, no grave, no Satan, only a king. And those who waited for him in darkness, now alive in a light that will never fade. When the multitude entered glory, he did not stop. There was still one task, one final rite. Only he could perform it. Only he had been chosen before time had a name. It was not a throne of gold, not a hallway of jasper, not celebration, not song. It was the most holy place, the deepest chamber in the celestial realm where the light does not dazzle, but causes all things to fall face down, where God does not speak, yet every molecule trembles, since Eden's exile. No being not Adam, not the patriarchs, not the seraphim had stepped beyond that veil, because this was the place of blood, not the blood of goats, not of bulls, not of 1,000 yearly sacrifices, but true blood, the blood of the crucified, the sinless one, the one who died for those the pit had every right to claim. And he entered. No door needed pushing, for this door had only one key, his death, and only he had the right to turn it. He brought no angels, no procession, no trumpet sound, only himself, and an unseen cup filled with his own blood. Each step declared, "I shed this not for me, but for them, for those who died in hope, and for those still crawling in darkness." In the Old Covenant, a high priest entered the Holy of Holies once a year. He had to bring blood, had to sprinkle it 7 times, had to wear bells in case sin struck him dead, and he needed to be dragged out. But today, this high priest wore no bells, no fear, no veil. He had already died. He had already risen. And now, he walked into the holiest place, not as a servant, but as the Son. His hand did not tremble as he set the blood on the eternal mercy seat. There was no sound, no wing moved, no whisper from angels. But the spirit realm understood. Atonement was finished. No repetition, no revisions, no altar left waiting. His blood did not dry, did not clot. It lived, it spoke, it interceded. And when it touched the throne, every invisible chain around humanity fractured. Every old debt erased, every curse burned. From that moment forward, no soul could ever again say, "I am beyond forgiveness," because the blood had spoken first. He lifted his face. He made no plea, asked no permission. For when the blood met the throne, the Father stood. Not with a word, but with a trembling that echoed through every heaven. Victory was sealed. In the highest place where all stories begin, a Son of Man had brought the blood home. Not as one saved from death, but as the Lamb slain, now standing at the center of the throne, as if he had never fallen. Revelation calls him the White Lamb. The Jews call him Messiah. The Greeks, Kyrios, we Savior. But here, in the secret heart of the spiritual cosmos, he was simply the bearer of blood, and the only one with the right to say, "It is finished." Atonement no longer lives behind veils, no longer waits in tabernacles, no longer depends on earthly priests. It has been sealed in the Holy of Holies beyond time by the one who passed through death, conquered Sheol, and carried his own blood to where it was always meant to rest. From now on, every prayer, every tear, every shattered soul needs no translator, for the Redeemer stands beside the Father, and his blood still speaks. The ritual complete. The door once never opened will never close again. The dead may live, the lost may return, the fallen may walk straight to the mercy seat, because the blood mark remains forever. On earth, no one knew this had just happened. They still whispered about an empty tomb, about guards and angels, about a garden. But far above, in the throne, no eye had seen a single drop of living blood had shifted the fate of every soul. He who passed from cross to Sheol, to the court of heaven, carried no sword, wore no earthly crown, only blood. And that blood still saves, still intercedes, still opens doors no death can seal. 3 days had passed, the tomb empty, the blood placed upon the throne, the righteous brought home, death uncloaked, its keys surrendered, the underworld torn open like the temple veil. And truly, he could have stayed there, seated beside the Father, glorious in a light that needs no sun, surrounded by angels and saints, enthroned in hymns with no more tears, no more flesh, no more shadow. But he didn't stay. He returned. Not because he forgot something, not out of longing for the dust, not because heaven lacked, but for one reason left unfinished: you. Scripture says after the resurrection, he remained 40 days. Not to boast in triumph, not to declare doctrine, not to start movements, seminaries, or fundraising tours, but to touch one person at a time, one wound, one name, one heart. Thomas doubted. He did not shame him. He simply held out his hand. Place your finger here, not to defend resurrection, but to heal the heartbreak of believing too late. Peter had denied him 3 times. He didn't condemn. He asked 3 times, "Do you love me?" Not because he needed the answer, but because Peter needed to say it. Because confession would break the chains his silence had forged. He appeared not in the temple, not in front of rulers, but on the road to Emmaus, 2 disciples, hearts heavy, dreams shattered, leaving Jerusalem in grief. He walked beside them as a stranger, reopened the scriptures, broke bread, and the moment their eyes opened, he vanished. Because he didn't need to stay once their hearts had caught fire. He appeared on the shore, while the disciples went back to fishing. No one called for him. but he was already there. Fire kindled, fish grilled, bread broken, not to fill their stomachs, but to whisper, "I still remember the taste of earth." He didn't ascend into myth. He didn't vanish into mysticism. He stayed in resurrected flesh to say one thing. "I am closer than your next breath." Those 40 days, no crowds, no campaigns, no theatrics, just encounters, one by one, as if resurrection was never meant to be an event but a visitation to every heart that doubted, grieved, or was ready to give up. And then he ascended, not with distance, but with blessing. Hands raised, not clenched, not grasping, but releasing like a father sending a child to walk the path alone, but never without him. The disciples looked upward. They did not see Sheol. They did not see the throne. They did not see the saints walking Zion's mount. They saw him, the one who died, now alive, blessing them in the open sky. A cloud received him, but their gaze did not lower, because for the first time in human history, we knew. A man with scarred hands and lungs, once breathless, now sat at the right hand of God. Not a symbol, not a vision, not an angel, but a man who had wept, hungered, bled, been betrayed, now crowned with a glory that doesn't fade, and a name that no kingdom can rival. He ascended, but he did not disappear, because the one who went into death, who walked Sheol, who cracked the grave, and placed his blood on the throne, has never left the soul that calls to him. Even now, he is not in the tomb, not confined to temples, not lost in clouds. He is here in this moment, where your eyes meet these words, where your breath still warms the air, where questions swirl with no answers, where grief still lingers, where you are tired, but still standing. He never left. You just haven't opened the door. Yet, because if you whisper his name, you will see. The light of the third day still shines in the darkest place within you. There are depths not beneath your feet, but inside your chest. Darker than Sheol, quieter than any grave, colder than the tomb sealed by Roman stone. It's where your tears go to hide, where screams stay caged in your throat, where your soul once collapsed and no one noticed. And it is there he steps in. He didn't descend into hell just once. He still descends every day into us. Not to repeat a miracle, but to establish a covenant. Not with crowds, not with creeds. With you, when your heart is sealed like a tomb. When your trauma lies cold like a forgotten corpse. When your faith is swept away like spring floods on ancient soil. And you whisper, "I'm done. There's nothing left to save." He is not shocked. He is not disappointed, because he has already gone deeper than where you're falling now. He doesn't ask how many scriptures you've memorized. He doesn't ask what church you belong to, or how long you've believed. He simply asks, "Can you hear me? I'm calling from the darkest part of you. And if you dare admit, there's a part of me that has died, that is where he will touch first." Scripture never promised he would avoid the pit. It tells us only this: he entered it and walked out holding the keys. Which means every grave in you has an open path. Every dead space has a dawn waiting. There is no night he cannot find you in, no fear he hasn't already tasted, no silent sob he can't translate into mercy. You don't need to scream, don't need to perform, don't need to make promises you know you can't keep. Just crack the stone. One sliver, one breath, one fragile sliver of softness in that hardened place. And you'll see it. The light of the third day seeping through the fracture. Not blinding, not burning, just warm like a hand on your forehead at midnight. And you'll hear him say, "I once descended into Sheol to find you. And today, I'm still here because you're still worth finding. Those 3 days in the earth were never just history. They are a sacred pattern for every soul swallowed by shadow. He went ahead. He carved the path. He shattered the gate. He holds the key. The door is no longer locked. All that remains is for you to rise. And walk. Don't wait for collapse. Don't wait for midnight. Don't wait for burial to crave resurrection. Because the call is happening now. In the room you sit in the ache you've buried for years. Step out. Out of the shame. Out of the numbness. Out of the reflection you've avoided in the mirror. Because he stepped out of the grave. And now, no one has to stay there. And if you're still here, maybe your soul has just been touched in its deepest place. At Tales of Black, every story is a ritual, a remembrance that some truths are not written in ink, but in blood, in breath, in the bones we carry. If something stirred in you on this journey, share it. With someone still wandering, subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. And if there's a legend, a question, a haunting you carry, leave it in the comments. Because maybe your story is the next sacred tale waiting to be spoken aloud.